What's going on? Just showing a quick video on my 16 Mustang GT. I'm going to be replacing all the wheel studs with the ARP 1 inch longer than factory wheel studs. The part number is 100-7733. Here's a quick comparison. Here's a stock one, and you can see they're quite a bit longer. So here's the wheel studs. Obviously I'm going to have to go with an open-ended lug nut. These are the Ford Performance. Here's the part number. Unfortunately, I was hoping they'd have them offered in black, but they don't. So this is what I have for now. I'm going to use the Lisle 22-800 wheel stud installer tool. It's pretty neat. It's concave for the Acorn lug nuts, as well as on the back it has like a bearing. So I mean, you could do it with you know, the old trick with a bunch of washers, and I mean this is basically the same thing, but it just should make it a smoother install since it has the concave in it, as well as it has the bearing on the back that will spin. So the first step is we're going to remove the two bolts holding on the caliper. Mine has the performance package, so I have the 6-piston Brembo brakes. It's two 15mm bolts that hold on the caliper. And now we have all the wheel studs extended, or now we have all the wheel studs exposed. So now we have the caliper off, the rotor came off. So now we're going to remove the factory wheel studs. A few methods to do it. I'm just going to do it with a hammer, hitting these out, and then I'll show you how to pull them in. You want to just be careful when you're hitting these out, because they tend to go down, and then you got the wheel speed sensor ring back here, so you don't want to mess that up. So now we're just going to want to hit these. Should take a few hits. There we go. And then repeat 5 more times, or 4 more times. Again, I know you can hit it harder, but again, I don't want to mess up the ring in the back. That's why I'm kind of just tapping it softly, as well as there's less load on this bearing, you know, from just giant hits. There we go. Now we have all 5 removed, so I'm just going to spray this down with a little brake clean, get it ready, and we'll move to the next step. Alright, so I got this all sprayed down. I'm going to just hit it up with some air, clean out the holes. Then we're going to start installing the wheel studs. So not saying this is the only way you can do it. Everybody has their own methods. I'm going to just put a slight bit of anti-seize on the actual spline part. I'm personally not going to put any on my threads. Some people recommend that. Do whatever you think is right. I don't want to do that, but for my own reasons. But I'm going to put a little bit on here. It just helps draw it in a little easier. And nothing crazy, just a little on the splines, like that. And then I'm just going to clean up any excess. And we all know, if you ever work with this stuff, it gets everywhere. So now we're going to put this in. So now you'll see on the back, there's one part is flat, just like the factory one. Factory one has a flat spot as well. And you want that closer to like the bearing, because otherwise this won't fit in, it won't sit right. there's not enough room. So just take that into account. So go here first. Then we're going to take the Lisle tool, put it on here, take the wheel stud that's going to be dedicated to install. Okay, and then I like to just give it one little turn so it's basically where it's going to be, and you can see that this flat edge is closest to the bearing. And then we're just going to take the old trusty DeWalt impact. We're just going to pull it on and watch the back, and once it gets tight, we're going to loosen it back up. And one last. Okay. And then I like to just blow it off with some air. Verify that it's all the way in and it looks good, and we'll move on to the next one. And then we draw it back in. And you just watch the back and watch it actually get drawn in. And then so next I'm just going to have to put on the rotor, and then put the caliper back on, tighten that down. Those get torqued to 85 foot-pounds on the 16 Performance Pack GTs. So now onto the rear. I already removed the caliper, the caliper bracket, and the rotor, and I took off the just the shield. But basically, I was seeing if you could do the studs without removing the wheel bearing, but it looks like you're gonna have to. This is the only corner that had a slight chance, but even that you still just can't. And you might be able to finagle this one out, but there'd be no way to get the new one in. So we're gonna have to remove the wheel bearing, so I'll show you guys that real quick. Alright, so the first step, obviously you'd want to remove the caliper, then you'd want to remove the caliper bracket or bridge, and then the rotor will just come off. So now that we have all that, we're going to remove the axle nut. It's a 32 millimeter. And so then you're just going to want to make sure it's freed up. I actually replaced this bearing last year, so this should be pretty simple. So I got them loose. A lot of times people will disconnect the vertical link, and they'll make it so this, I guess this is the trailing arm, whatever you want to call this. But so this whole thing comes down. I don't want to do that. I've done it before, so I'm going to cheat, leave all this stuff hooked up, and get to the bolts. You just going to need like a few extensions to do it. So we'll do that next. All right, so down here, so it's going to be hard to see. So I'll try to videotape it the best I can. But basically, there's 4 bolts on the back side. On this side, they're pretty accessible. You could just get on it with like a wrench even. But on the other side, you're going to need at least like a inch or a 3-inch extension. We'll figure it out however I get them out. But I'll try to show you guys the best I can. But at least I'll explain what tools I'm using to do each one. And just remember, so we're on the driver's side rear. So when you're looking, these are the ones furthest to the back of the car, and then the ones that are a little harder to get to are the ones closer to the front of the car. Okay. Alright, so you can kind of see it again. I know it's tough, but that's the top one, and then the bottom one's below it, obviously. I'm just using a 15 millimeter shallow socket and a 3-inch extension. I'm going to put it on the bolt first, just like that. I'm going to use a ratchet. Should come off. Now I'm going to do the same for the bottom. And then the next step is you're going to remove all 4 of these bolts that we just loosened up. So one thing to note when doing it the way I'm doing, the problem is, you know, if you're going to actually replace the bolts, it's not going to clear, it's going to hit the half shaft. Let's see. See, it's hitting that. So I mean, if you're reusing the bolts, you could just leave them there, but I mean, technically they are supposed to be replaced. Like all these 4 bolts are one-time use, torque to yield, so I'm replacing them. But all you got to do is just push the half shaft back a little bit, and you can pop it out like that. See, I just pushed it just a little bit, and it's enough to get all the bolts out. And so I'll be honest, usually you'll have to tap the bearing in order to get it out with like a small, with like a soft hammer. Just tap it gently around the edge, but since I just replaced this one last year, it just wants to come right out. So I'm just gonna slide it off like that. And there's the bearing. We're gonna swap the studs on. I'll show you guys that next. So the bottom bolts still don't want to clear the half shaft when I was just pushing it back a little, but now I think since I got the bearing out, I can just put it on a little angle and actually slide them out. So the top, you can just push this back a hair, slide them out, and then the bottom, once you get the bearing actually out, you can loosen them all the way up. It's just you got to get the bearing all the way out in order to get the bottom bolts out. So what I'll do is when I'm reinstalling it, I'm actually going to place the new bolts on the bottom first. Just let them sit in there, put the bearing on, and then I'll feed it in like that. Just wanted to make that note. Because again, I'm cheating here. You are supposed to have the knuckle come down, but I just find that to be more work personally. One more piece of advice is the half shaft's going to want to sit like this, but it puts a lot of pressure on the wheel speed sensor. So I mean, you could just remove it, but I'm just being lazy. So I'm just going to rest it like that, so it's not pushing against that. Otherwise, you'll get a bunch of, you know, ABS codes, traction control will be off, and all that stuff. So just wanted to point that out so you don't break this guy. Alright, so just how I'm going to remove the studs. I got the bearing out, obviously. So I'm just going to hit them with the hammer again, just like I did on the fronts. Just they're outside of the car. And I'm just going to draw them in. And I mean, it's up to you. You could do it in a vise. I'm just going to do it right here. And again, so you just want to make sure the flat part is not cocked or, you know, gonna hit the bearing at all. And so there you go. All 5 of the new studs are in. So basically you just left to reinstall it. The wheel bearing bolts, the 4 bolts, will be torqued to 98 foot-pounds. The axle nut is 98 foot-pounds as well, plus 45 degrees. The best way to do that is the last thing, once you get all the brakes hooked up. I'll probably just pull the e-brake and tighten it that way, otherwise it just spins. And then the bridge bolts, the caliper bracket bolts, those are torqued to 129 foot-pounds. And then the caliper itself is torqued to only 24 foot-pounds. Alright, so just going to show you real quick. I'm just going to put a slight bit of anti-seize on the inside of here, just very little on the very outside lip. And then just a tiny bit on the splines of the axle itself. Again, just nothing crazy, just a little. And it may not be necessary, but I'm going to put the bolts on the bottom in first. Just let them sit. Into the axle. And we're just going to feed it up like that. And then now you got them all started by hand, and then it's really just tighten them all down, like I said before. So just wanted to show you guys what the 1 inch longer than factory wheel studs look like on the Performance Pack factory wheels. It definitely sticks out a little more than I hoped it to, but I mean, it is what it is. But here's the rear. From the side is not too bad, it's just, it definitely does stick out, you know, it is definitely noticeable. But just wanted to show you guys what it looks like, in case you're in between of how long you want to go, you know, because they do offer them 1/2 inch longer than the factory ones and 1 inch longer. And again, I went with the inch longer.